Ohio's governor vetoed a bill this week that would have added new photo ID requirements for voters who send their ballots in the mail. Other Republican leaders say they're not done with this push. Here's Josh Croup with why it matters.
Back in 2023, Ohio Governor Mike DeWine signed into law a series of election reforms, which included requiring photo IDs to vote in person. That bill carved out an exception for mail-in ballots. Voters sending ballots in the mail have to fill out an identification envelope instead. Lying on the document is a felony. When he signed that bill, Governor DeWine said he appreciated lawmakers working with his administration to make sure the bill kept looser ID requirements intact for mail-in ballots. He also said he believed election integrity issues are settled, adding he didn't expect to see any further election law changes on his watch. So it came as little surprise to some this week when he vetoed a bill that would have added more ID requirements for mail-in ballots. Writing in his veto message, the bill would create an additional burden for voters, and it is not needed. Republicans were already working to enshrine photo ID requirements in the state's constitution. Some of the party said their proposal didn't go far enough, though. So the GOP fast-tracked this separate mail-in ballot ID bill. The legislation would have given voters multiple options to verify their identity, included exceptions for people with disabilities and those in the military, and required some government agencies like libraries to provide free copies of photo IDs. Democrats were against the legislation, arguing it still put up too many barriers, particularly for older voters.
This is an anti-granny and pawpaw bill.
Republicans argued it was common sense.
Granny and pawpaw have computers. Granny and pawpaw have iPhones. Granny and pawpaw are posting more memes on Facebook than half the young people in this state.
DeWine's veto doesn't close the door on this requirement coming to Ohio in the future, though. The Republican running for Secretary of State called his veto disappointing. So did the Republican Senate president, who's running to be the lieutenant governor. His running mate, who wants to be the next governor, says he would sign a photo ID requirement for mail-in ballots into law. The legislature can choose to overturn DeWine's veto when it returns after November's election, or restart this legislative process in 2027 with a new General Assembly and a new governor. So while the current governor has said he considers Ohio's election integrity debate settled, others in power or those seeking it are making it clear it's not. That's why it matters. Josh Croup, 13 Action News.